Hi, in this video I'm going to be showing you how to shade in Clip Studio Paint. I've actually already made a video like this before, but I have updated my method a little bit. So yeah, here's the new one. Alright, so here I have a little diagram, and I'm going to be using this to show you all of the tools that I use to color in the other thing, because if I jump straight into that and don't explain anything, it's going to make no sense. So this first thing that I kind of have set up is just in a bunch of different layers. So you see I have red on its own layer in case you were coloring one thing. I have the blue and the yellow in case you're coloring something with a gradient or crossover in it. Here you'll see I have something for a draft layer and then locking transparency. So the first thing that you'll need to do is when you're on your paint bucket tool, look at your subtools and make sure that it's clicking refer other layers. What that means is it's going to read the information from every single layer, not just one, because if you're referring only to one layer and you try to color something, for example, this, it's going to fill the whole thing in black. But if I click on refer other layers, it's actually going to be reading everything and it's going to just only fill in this section. The reason it would do that is because it reads, hey, there's a circle here. And other than that, say you have a sketch, you have some of your shading figured out in it and you have this draft layer. So say you have your like little sketch and you need to color something in, but you need to refer to your sketch. So if I tried to fill this in with refer other layers like this, but fill it all in and ignore the blue in the background, you'll see it doesn't work very well. It's still trying to read that there is blue there, which is kind of annoying. So what I could do is if I go over to my sketch layer, I could simply undo it and then try to color and then my life is good. But if I need this as a reference for something, what I can do is I can actually hit this little button over here, and you'll see it gives a little blue line. That means that that's a draft layer, which means you can see it, but Clip Studio Paint can't see it. So it's there for you to help you, but Clip Studio Paint is like, what is this? This isn't real. And then you can still fill it in. And then you see that I can actually still move that little sketch around. So it's like, wow, isn't that neat? This is really useful if you're doing any kind of manga shading. So say, for example, you had an outline of something that you really needed to color and you were trying to come up with a really complicated shape for something, or hold on, let's say that there's a smiley face here that you really needed to know about for some reason. You can still see that and you'll be able to draw it. So you're like, all right, cool. So bam, that's a draft layer. The last thing is to lock your transparency. So what this does is it won't let you draw outside of the boundary that you set for yourself. So right now the layer is normal, which means if I want to try coloring in it, I can color anywhere I want. And I'll pick a different color just to kind of illustrate that. We'll go with the Joker combination. So you'll see it colors outside of the lines. But if I go over here and then I click on this little checkbox thing, log transparent pixel, that's the magical color inside the lines button. So now if I try coloring in it, it stays in the lines, and that's going to be important for later. So now that I kind of explained those few things, I can show you a small version here with this box of what I'm going to be doing over here with this character. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the paint bucket tool, make sure it's referring to the other layers, and bam, I'm going to drop in this base. So I have my line art, and then over here we'll name this skin. I'm going to create a new layer, and this one I'm going to name shading. And then from here, it's just easier if you untoggle the colors for everything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to shading and I'm going to pick a color. Whatever color it is up to you. So let's pretend that this is the skin, and I'm going to be like, all right, let's shade this because why not? And then let's pretend that this orb over here is the hair. So we'll just draw this. And then let's pretend that over here, this is something else. I don't know, their eyeball. So you'll see that I'm actually putting all of the shading on one layer. And there is a reason for that. So now this one, I'm just going to push all the way to the top. So it's underneath your line art, but it's on top of everything else. Then I'm going to bring all of these colors back. And what I'm going to do with the shading layer is I'm going to lock the opacity on that. Remember the thing we were talking about over here. And what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to select the skin. I'm going to pick the shading tone for the skin. So now I have my tone. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to this skin layer. I'm going to hold control and then click on that little preview so it automatically selects the skin layer. Then I'm going to go back to my shading, and then I'm going to fill that in. So you can either press Alt Backspace, or you can click this little button here, or you can just click. So there's a few ways of doing that. You'll see it automatically filled in this chunk. So you're like, hey, that's neat, but that's still only just on the shading layer. Then I'm going to go into the blue, same thing. So I'm going to go to my blue, hold Control, click on that. So that way you see that it selects the blue. And then I'm going to go back to my shading layer. I'm going to pick whatever blue I wanted here. So I'll make that a little bit darker. Make sure that you're on your shading layer, and make sure that the transparency on it is locked, because if it's not, and you try to do this, it's going to fill the whole thing. You don't want it to fill the whole thing. So make sure that that's locked. Alt Backspace, and bam, there you go. Now for our yellow, we're going to select our yellow, and then I'm going to go to the layer for this. Click on this, so it makes that little selection. Going to go back to the shading layer. Going to give it a different shadow. Alt Backspace. See kind of what I'm getting at here. Then we're going to go to the red over here for the eye. I'm going to click on the layer for that, hit Control, and then click on that, so it makes a little selection of that. Going to go back to the shading, going to click on the red and go here, and then Alt Backspace. So you'll see I actually did the shading for several different things and was able to pick my own colors all with one layer. I know that you could probably just use a multiply blending mode for this, but the reason I don't is because multiply will only take the certain color you have and make a darker version of it. But with this, you actually get to control exactly what you want your color to be. I also forgot to explain that this works for highlights. So if you wanted to do that, you just create a new layer, name it highlights, and I'm going to pick a random color again, just for visibility. So I'm going to go with the, on this one. So I'm gonna draw this, that, and that, because why not? I'm going to lock these layers, and then you could still cycle through these if you want, but since these highlights are pretty sparing, I could just draw directly on the layer. So there you go. For the blue, we're gonna select a different one. Right now, again, I'm making sure that my opacity is locked. Then I'm gonna go to the yellow, make the highlight for that, then skin orb there, make a highlight for that, then bam. So you'll see all of my shadows, all of my highlights on 2 layers. Pretty much what I did with these little spheres is what I'm going to be doing over here with this character. So I'm going to have a layer for just the skin, a layer for just the hair, a layer for just the clothing. You'll see all of my shading is already on the one layer pretty much, so you'll see that's the shading. And I'm going to do the exact same thing. But you're going to notice this one over here doesn't have shading yet. So hold on, give me a second. I need to cook for a minute. And then when I'm done with that, we'll be back, okay? Shading really fast. Technically shading at regular speed, but I sped it up so it looked like I'm going fast. So just a little note of what I do, and you don't have to do this, it's up to you, but I add a little bit of a kind of a blur or a smudge on the skin itself. So you'll see the hair is very sharp, but you see the skin, I gave it a little bit of a blur. And also, if you wanted to shade with more than one color, you can actually do that. So with the shading, you could call this like shading 1. And then if you wanted to make even darker tones or something, so say for example, you want the hair here to be like really dark, then you could just start into another layer and do that. I'll include like this much just to show you that it stacks. But yeah, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go in and create a bunch of different layers to separate my selections. And it's going to be based off of color. So the skin is going to have its own layer, the hair is going to have its own layer, these like little designs are all going to have their own layers. It's the same mentality as here with the colored balls. So if it has a different color and you want it to shade a different way, you're going to create a new layer for it. Make a layer for everything. Make sure that your lines are clean. If it has its own unique shade, make sure that a new layer gets made. I kind of got some base colors that I'm happy with. So I know that there's gonna be one person in the comments that says, hey, if you already put all of your shading on this, why don't you put on a multiply layer and then bam, you're done, right? Look, easy. No, I'm really specific and picky with my colors, so I like being able to pick what they are. So I'm just gonna make sure that all of these layers are locked, and just like what we did with this ball over here, it's gonna be the same process. So It might take me a couple of tries to get this skin color right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find my skin layer. I'm going to hit Control and then click on this little preview window. So that way it automatically selects all of the skin. And then I'm going to go back to my shading layer, which is this one with all the shading on it. And I'm going to pick a color for the skin. I'm going to try that and see how that goes. And that one's okay. This character is tan, so I'm just trying to kind of convey that. And then for the hair, I think I'll do that next. So I know her hair is going to be black, but it's like black with a purple undertone in it. So I want to kind of try to convey that. Then I'm going to click on this hair layer, click on that just to make the selection. Then I'm going to go back to my shading and then hold backspace. And weird, so I'm going to mess with that. There we go. And seeing this, it kind of makes me want to change the main tone of the hair because that other one looks a little too saturated. So I'm going to go back to the hair and then alt backspace. And that's what I like about this is you can literally make changes on the fly when you have this kind of setup. So it's pretty cool. See, I like that one much more. So now you can actually tell that there's a purple undertone in it. Then I'm going to go to the gold layer. So I'm going to click on the gold, make the selection for that, then go back to my shading. I'm going to click on this. And I'm gonna, call this gold, so this one shouldn't be difficult. Say that now, but watch it take 1,000 tries. Okay, and I like how that looks. Then for the black on her clothes, I'm gonna go to that. So we're gonna click on the clothes layer to make that selection. Then back to my shading, and I'm going to pick a color for that. So her clothes are a bit more desaturated than her hair. That's just to make that different. Then for this sleeve right here, so I'm going to click on that. We're going to give it a little gold tone. So I'm going to click on the sleeve, make the selection for that, go back to the shading. And so it's a lot of prep work to get to this point, but once you are done, it just flies because you saw how fast it literally colored the whole character. It's like within 20 states. So you'll see the character goes from completely unshaded to bam, there you go, shaded like that really, really quickly. So it just depends on how detailed or how simplistic you want it to be. But you're going to notice that there's a couple of little things like the face, which I didn't have shaded in with this method. And that's just because I just like giving the face its own layer. And also, if you have secondary details, I just leave those for later. So there's fire and there's her lips. So it's just like, okay, so I just leave those on separate layers, just so I can kind of work on those myself. So this will be good at getting like 90% of your job done, but then, the other 10% is just like, hey, you're an artist, figure it out. And that fire is an okay color actually. So what I'm just going to add like a little wisp in it. And again, I hope that you have found this helpful because, like I said, I want it to be slow enough that you really see and understand what I'm doing, but fast enough that you're not like 45-minute YouTube tutorial. Okay, and now from here, I'm just going to go ahead and work on the face. This, like I said, is just its own layer, so it shouldn't be too difficult. At that point, just make a new layer and draw what you want. So I'm going to work on this really fast, and then I'm going to show you how to do highlights. Remember those? They're cool. Oh, and the deeper shadows. So say you don't want your character to just be two-toned and you want them to be three-toned. I'll show you how to do that here in a second. I don't know how to make a song, so you should check out my Patreon. I got some stuff laid in, so I have 2 more layers now. So just know that for continuity, I would probably add all of the shading and all of the highlights before I even add the character colors. So, if you do it later on in the process, it actually makes it weird. So if I were doing this normally, hold on, I would do the shading 2, which would have been the darker colors and the highlights all in one go. I would have figured everything out. Those like manga sheets, like the ones that people have for production? That's literally what I would do with this. But, we're being a little wacky and out of order today. So now for shading 2, it's literally the same process as before. So I want to make her hair a little darker. So I'm going to lock this layer to make sure that we're not accidentally flood filling, because if it's not locked, remember, it's going to do that. So I'm going to lock this layer, and then I'm going to go to the hair because that's the thing I want to select. Hold Control, click on that. So we select the hair. I'm going to go to here and make that a little darker. Then I'm going to go back to shading 2, Alt Backspace, bam, that's colored in. Then with the sleeve, I want to go to the sleeve layer to make that selection. I'm going to make that a little bit darker and go back to shading 2, Alt Backspace, fill that in. Then for the gold, same deal. Select color for that, go to the gold, make my selection layer by Control and then click on that, shading 2, Alt Backspace. So you'll see now we have a secondary tone of shading. I only added a little bit because this is a character design sheet. I don't think it should have a lot. Then with highlights, if you do have a lot of highlights that are actually separated, you can keep doing that method I was telling you about. But since I don't have a lot of highlights, I'm just gonna do everything on one layer because I'm a little lazy. So I'm gonna go just to the highlights, make sure that it's locked, and I'll just kind of color this in manually. The skin, gonna have a highlight. So there you go. And I manually colored in the character's eyes, and you might be thinking to yourself, all right, that's cool, neat, we're done. But like, are we though? Because another thing that I like to do, and this is just the icing on the cake, you don't have to do it, but I like to do it. I'm just gonna create a new folder. I'm gonna name this shading. And then I'm gonna kind of take all of this and drag it into shading. And then with this new layer, I'm gonna create a new layer and clip this one to that one. So the reason I do it this way is because what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add an overlay layer to everything just to kind of give it a nice little gradient, like a little bit of overlay is good, but when overlay is all you're doing, I just don't think it's fun because you don't get to control your colors. But I do it this way because I can either add 10,000 separate overlay layers to all of this stuff, or if I just put it in one folder and put the overlay on the folder, I make one, which is, a lot nicer for your layer management and whatnot. So I'm just gonna go over here, pick like a slightly purple-ish tone, and then I'm kind of just gonna brush in just a little bit of contrast and a little bit of highlight. I just think it's nice, and gotta set it to overlay though, so just a little bit. Doesn't need to be a lot. So some slight purple to make things have a little bit of a life to them, and then I'm going to go with a little bit of that little red that's on top, like the pinkish red that's on top. I want to kind of brandish a little bit of that in there, just for reflected lighting. So yeah. And then from here, if you wanted to have any little details, you can just create a layer for that. So her like lips, I'm thinking that they should have a little bit of a shine on them. This character is like a time god character, so I don't know exactly why a time god would have any kind of particular preference for like lip shine, orchid purple number 43 with extra shine and whatever. But there you go. So just those little touches. So you'll see just a little bit, just before and after. It's not much, but it's just a little bit. Just really makes them, but yeah, now I'm done. And if you wanted to add more shading or highlights or make it really fancy and make your characters look freaking amazing, that's cool. But the thing is, you're probably doing an illustration. I am doing a character sheet, so this shouldn't have even had shading to begin with. But yeah, I'm done. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you learned something. Even if you don't use this method, I hope that you just learned something. So, just add that to your toolbox and whatever. But yeah. Thank you for watching, if you did watch, and I will see you the next time I upload, which will probably be in a year. Bye!